Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this night's interview. A deadly Russian missile strike has hit Lviv, injuring dozens and damaging a U.S.-linked factory, just as talks of a ceasefire edge back onto the table. Hungary now offers to host negotiations, while European leaders debate how to protect Ukraine without full NATO membership. Should Europe take the lead, and what role will the United States play? Joining us on TVP World is Ryhor Nizhnikau, a senior researcher from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
So the first thing that I want to unpack is what we know so far about this Russian strike in Lviv and its reported impact on the U.S.-connected factory.
Well, it's obviously not a coincidence. Russians wanted to show the strength. Russians wanted to show how much they value the Donald Trump's mediation role, and to remind that, they have the upper hand so far.
Right, and I think this is a reoccurring pattern. A lot of experts have been saying that it does seem like whenever Trump tries to negotiate with Putin, he would launch another wave of attack in Ukraine and take some more provocative actions. It's almost if he's giving him a middle finger. How do you think the U.S. will react to that?
Look, it's been exactly the case. We remember all this six conversation over the phone between Trump and Putin only. And every time we had an attack on civilian targets. As long as Donald Trump is not ready to really show strength, to impose sanctions, to really arm Ukraine, Russians will continue to do that because their actions have faced no consequences, and that's as easy as it is.
Right. Do you think that Trump has received a message at this point? Because recently we actually saw his social media activity seeming to have turned on a tougher stance against Putin. He's been posting pictures that is evoking Cold War era imagery, and also posting online that if the peace negotiation doesn't go through, other measures should be taken. Of course, he didn't really specify what, but we can speculate a little bit.
Yes, we can speculate, but the problem is that he should not do it on social media. He should do it in real life, and he had a lot of time to do that. So the best way is to go back to his ultimatum of a month ago and just basically implement it and just give Ukraine what he promised during his electoral campaign. That's the only answer, not through this public statements. Russians cracked him, that's my guess. Russians understand that Trump does not want to escalate at this moment, and that's why they can behave unpunitive. Now, I'm also very curious because when we were talking about the rare earth mineral deal with Ukraine, one of the arguments provided by the United States of why this could be a de facto security guarantee is that having U.S. companies, U.S. personnel on the ground close to Russia can de facto kind of deter Russia from taking any provocative or aggressive actions. But then we see this company, this factory being one of the bigger investments of the United States in Ukraine still being targeted. Does that undermine that previous argument? Absolutely, that's a great point. Thank you for raising it. That's why actually this mineral deal is not a security guarantee. This is something that Donald Trump and the US administration de facto invented. The business presence never deterred Russia from aggression, neither in Georgia, not in Ukraine in 2014. We can enlist a number of U.S. companies present in all across the region where Russia just violated the sovereignty and rights of these countries. So only strong military presence can be a credible security guarantee, and that's what Russia is against. Now, when it comes to these security guarantees, where are we on that? Is there any critical progress actually towards negotiations between Ukraine and Russia? And do you think that the EU is ready to take bear the heavy lifting when it comes to providing Ukraine with the security? I think we are going in circles. We are nowhere near the peace deal obviously we are not, ceasefire is even easier, shall be easier than a peace deal. And we obviously are far away from the ceasefire, which has been just ruled out a week ago by Donald Trump. So there is no peace deal. Without a peace deal, the current discussion of the security guarantees is basically pointless, because Europeans cannot provide the security guarantees that Macron's Starmer or Meloni's plans envision without Russian permission. And Russia is continuing the war not to have the Western presence in Ukraine. So it's a stalemate, it's an impasse, and there is no way around unless there is a political will in Europe to overcome this Russia's veto.
Right. And it does seem like a lot of world leaders are now trying to square this circle and pretty much not getting anywhere. But in the meantime, a lot of world leaders are also trying to chime in with different methods of how it could work. Like Giorgia Meloni has proposed this NATO-light model as a path for protecting Ukraine without full membership. Do you think that this is something that could be feasible?
No. Look, if we are talking about Article 5 protection, then it requires a security deal, basically NATO-like security deal between the coalition of the willing and Ukraine, which would require then to deter potential Russian aggression when it happens. So if we cannot accept NATO membership for the reason that Europe and the US do not want a direct confrontation with Russians, direct contact with Russian army, so how can we credibly offer this type of agreement, which will basically have the same type of a potential? So to my reading, all these plans are linked to, not to flatter, but actually to support Donald Trump's fake peace deal process. They don't have any substance, because all these plans require Russian permission. Russians will never agree to any type of these security guarantees, and Europe is not ready to do it without Russia's permission. So this is all to show Donald Trump that Europeans support his peace initiative.
And speaking of Russia, they've also been coming up with their side of demands. And of course, from the European perspective, it looks very, very unreasonable. They say any security must also include China itself as well, and that Ukraine must stay neutral. And of course, a lot of kind of de-arming, essentially. This is also not anything that could be reached realistically. So it does seem like we're at an impasse where nobody wants to get any grounds. How do you see things develop from here?
The war will continue, and there is no diplomatic solution at this moment. So Donald Trump has been selling air, basically nothing, to show the good picture of himself. But there is no structural conditions to have a diplomatic solution at the moment. Russians want to continue the war, and they are ready to continue this war until the end of Donald Trump's term as the president.
All right, so going back to these social media posts on Threads that Trump was talking about and alluding to other measures, do you think that it would just be sanctions, or do you think that eventually Donald Trump will pursue something even more drastic, or do you think it's mostly just talk?
I think it's mostly just talk. We cannot trust Donald Trump to really do what Ukraine needs. For what we have discussed just a while ago, he doesn't want to escalate for whatever reasons. So he had already twice a chance to impose heavy sanctions on Russia in May of this year, and just basically a week ago, and he passed on both opportunities. So I don't think he seriously considers that option, but we will still see a few times change of his rhetoric and threats on the Truth Social or whatever. But as long as he is not credibly committed to that, Russians will totally ignore this rhetoric.
All right, so going to the European perspective, JD, Vance said that Europe should take the lion's share of responsibility for Ukraine. And also the Czech President Petr Pavel also suggested that European troops might need to help secure Ukraine. But like I mentioned earlier, it does seem like there's no political will or logistically very hard to achieve. Do you think that eventually the Europeans will be the ones that has to step in order to give Ukraine its security?
Absolutely. Under this administration, I mean, this Trump administration, it already is becoming the European responsibility, because we can see that this administration doesn't even want to reach its predecessors' commitment to Ukraine with financial and military resources. So it's more and more heavy burden on Europeans. And this is where it will continue under Donald Trump. So now, obviously, Europe is not ready. That's why Europe is doing everything to continue pleasing Donald Trump's ephemeral plans to keep him somehow engaged. But it clearly shows, I mean, Donald Trump's behavior shows that Ukraine and also European security is Europeans' responsibility.
All right, so it all comes back to being responsible for your own defense. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.